Hi guys, welcome to Multiverse. Today we're going to take a look at a mission that is known as the 411 mission, or 411 if you prefer. You'll sometimes see that in the looking for group chat, looking for people for 411 or something like that. The mission is actually called Seek and Destroy. I've already done it this week. It's a mission that you can do once a week, but for you guys, I will reset this mission. As you can see, it costs 87 replay badges to reset, so it's pretty expensive, so I wouldn't reset it too often. It gives 8 marks of victory and 8 war bonds, and basically it's called the 411 mission because you have to defeat 411 soldiers. It's pretty much that simple. There used to be 2 such missions. There was one mission for the war-torn village, and there was one mission for the war-torn Area 51 mission. But somehow, I guess people thought it was too much, so somehow it only became one mission. So you have to defeat enemy soldiers, whether you do it in the war-torn area or the war-torn village area or the war-torn Area 51 area. It's pretty much the same thing. It's the same soldiers and they all count for this mission. Sadly, the drawback is that finding people to do this mission sometimes is just not an option. Sometimes people just don't want to do this mission. So I'm going to try to show you how to do it if you have to do it by yourself. As you could see, there's quite a lot of enemies, but they're pretty much spread all over the map. So it may seem silly, but if you have to defeat enemies and then you have to move 100 feet to further and defeat a couple enemies and then move 100 feet further, it doesn't seem like it, but by yourself that can take quite a lot of time. So I will show you a place where you can go where there's a whole bunch of enemies pretty much stuck together in a small area, and these enemies respawn very quickly. So that's pretty much the best spot I find to play this mission. You can see on the map where we're located. There's also to the right where there's a similar setup, but somehow I much prefer this one. Although the enemies on this side are pretty tough, I'll probably make a follow-up videos doing it in the other corner and compare the two. Maybe it's easier in the other corner, maybe it's harder. I have no idea yet. So, but be warned, these guys are pretty tough, even at combat training 197. Sometimes they can be pretty tough, and if you're here at the minimum combat rating, they will be really tough. So if you're here at minimum combat rating, try to fight them just 1 or 2 at a time. Oh, we have a friend who wants to group. So. Since I'm combat rating 97, pretty much the same combat rating as the enemies, I can pretty much take them all, and even then you can see they're hurting me pretty bad. Oh, I took that cola just at the right time. So you can see with the combat rating 197, the result. You can be sure that if I had been combat rating 196, I think the minimum is 97, I forget. They probably would have kicked my backside. Our friend Dark Knight wants to group. I guess I'm gonna have to remove him from the group. So the enemies aren't too tough if you can get them 2 or 3 at a time. The trick is trying not to attract too many of them. Again, I'm combat rating 197, so it's not if I attract all of them, it's not too dramatic. I can make do either using my supply drops or my orbital strike, or even summoning my backups. But if I was combat rating like 185 or something, I would probably be in trouble if I pulled too many of them. So ideally, you want to fight them 2 or 3 at a time at the most, which is probably the hardest part in this area, because sometimes as you attack a couple of them, the whole bunch will be attracted to you, unless you're very careful. So sadly, our friend Dark Knight wants to play. I'm gonna have to just remove him. I'll finish those guys and I'll do that. So I'm going to just say goodbye to my friend. There we go. So let us continue. And if you have other players with you, even better. But sadly, sometimes you're pretty much stuck by yourself trying to do this mission. So again, this is pretty much the best spot. And you can see it does go up pretty quickly. So once in a while you'll have people helping you out while they're doing missions, although usually they don't stick around unless they too are doing the 411 mission. Sometimes it'll happen, like you'll be just fighting enemies to try to defeat enemies for the 411 mission, and then you'll notice there's one or two other guys that will seem to be doing the same thing. What I usually do, especially with my other characters, I'll follow those guys around. And sometimes there'll be 2 or 3 of us just going around fighting enemies. Sometimes we don't even need to be grouped together. Just being together and fighting the same enemies, usually we'll get the credit for all of them as long as we've damaged them. So once in a while you get lucky like that, and you can just find people that you can follow. But if you find no one else and you're pretty much by yourself, this area here is pretty much the best option to try to do the mission as quickly as possible. So as you can see, if you're careful, you can just fight 3 of them, let's say, to the right. But as you saw, once I did one of my large area effect power, I hit one of the guys to the left, and all of them started attacking me. Again, not a big deal with my Magneto character, but if you're with a lower level character, it could prove to be a challenge. Also, there's two things. The combat rating will affect how hard this mission will be, but also, sadly, the power you're using. When I'm doing these missions, let's say with an electric character, it is a lot harder than if I do these missions with, let's say, my Magneto with mental powers. So there's a few powers, mental, ice, fire. We'll be able to do this mission pretty easily, or these missions pretty easily. But some powers like electric, it's a lot more difficult. So sadly, seeing how a lot of players are pretty much set to the very same combat rating, you can see a huge gap between the powers. You can pretty much see the huge difference between when you're using ice powers as opposed to when you're using electric powers. The same was true there was the Central City mission with Starro the Conqueror not too long ago, where everyone was capped at the same level. I think it was level 34, and holy crap, doing those missions with an electric character would take some time. But again, doing those same missions with my Magneto or with some quantum character or an ice character was much easier. So if you ever needed a demonstration to be able to gauge which power is the most powerful and which powers are the least powerful, this is a good place to be. Take your characters, bring them to this map, and you'll see which powers are more powerful and which powers are struggling the most. Although, despite that, I still usually suggest to people to use the power they like best, because sometimes also the way you play the power will have somewhat of a small impact on your playstyle. So we're up to 139. 40. So this is about as quick as I can do this mission, 150. If I find a quicker way to do the mission, I'll probably make a follow-up video. But right now, if you want to play this mission, this is pretty much the easiest the simplest option if you do not find other people to do the mission with you. So there's a few missions here that ideally require a group, this being one of them. There's also the bounties. There's a bounty mission where you have to fight Solomon Grundy, Gentleman Ghost, Eclipso, and I forget, and Ultra Humanite. Ideally, you need a full group for those missions. So it'll take a while, but it's a weekly mission, so doing that once a week is not too much of a pain. Although I strongly suggest that you do that either Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, because like usually by Monday, pretty much everyone already did those missions. So it's the further you get from the weekly loot lock, the weekly reset, the harder it is to find a group to do those missions, because once people have done the bounties, well, they don't really want to do it again. So when we just had the weekly reset, usually it's easier to do those bounties. But the further you get from the weekly reset, the harder it is to find people for those bounties. And another bounty that we have on the Area 51 map is the Paradox bounties. At least I think it's a bounty. But that one is daily, so every day you can grab the Paradox mission and then look for players, ideally a full group. If you can get 8 players, that's the better option. Although we've done it a few times with less than 8 players. I think the smallest group we were was me and one other guy. But we were a bit lucky. It was one of the, let's say, easier Paradox, and we were well positioned, so that helped a lot. But usually if you can get at least 4 or 5 people, you should be okay. But there's one of them that's harder than the rest that I would strongly suggest you get 8 players. I'll try to make videos about that, but it's a bit tricky because it's kind of hard sometimes to find players to do that mission. And sometimes it happens out of nowhere by accident, and I wasn't really ready to do a video when that happened. So I'll see what I can do about that. So we're up to 192, so we're getting close to the halfway point. And strangely enough, there's no duo with that DLC. With that episode. Not sure why they decided to do that. Although they gave us a lot of single player options, so I guess that's a trade-off. No duo, but more solo missions. So I can live with that. And technically you can do the Paradox as a duo, or you can do this mission as a duo if you want to. So I guess in a roundabout way, you can still play 2 players, if you want to. I should probably have invited my friend the Dark Knight, but I wanted to show this video how you could do it solo. And having 2 players would have kind of falsified the data, if you will. So I'll try to make it up to my friend Dark Knight at some other point. Sorry, Dark Knight. Maybe next time. So we passed the halfway point. So just 200 more to go. So as you can see, the enemies, they're not too difficult if you can manage them in small group. And they respawn pretty quickly. So and as soon as you defeat the enemies on one side, you can move on to the other side and the enemies will have respawned, and vice versa. So you go on one side, defeat the enemies, move on to the other side, defeat the enemies. And the best part, which is also the challenging part sometimes, is that they're all squished into a fairly small area. So you don't have to cover a lot of ground like some other places on the map. And again, when you have to cover a lot of ground, it doesn't. It seems silly, but it can take a lot longer to complete that mission if you have to cover too much distance between enemies. So here it's perfect. You barely have to move from one side to the next. Enemies respawn really quickly, so there's always enemies to defeat, and you don't have to travel all that much. So far, that is the better option that I've seen. But again, if I see a better option, I'll make a follow-up video for you guys. Sometimes you'll use your orbital strike or your backups to try to speed up the process a bit. Usually, I try to keep them in case I run into trouble. Like sometimes if let's say if I pull into too many enemies, then I'll use the backups or the supply drop to get me out of a jam. Although I can easily alternate, I can use the supply drop, the orbital strike, and then wait a bit, and then use the backups and wait a bit, and then use the supply drops, and then I always have something as a backup. Even grandeur I kind of use as a last resort, more often than not. You can say I don't use it as often as I could or maybe should, but again I try to keep it for when there's really a lot of enemies, then I can cast mass levitation, then grandeur, then mass levitation again, and usually that will help me if there's too many enemies on my poor little Magneto. He's an old mutant, and I have to take care of him a bit. So we're almost at 250. So this is pretty much as fast as I'm able to do this mission. Again, if I find a faster way, I'll try to share it with you guys. But right now, this is pretty much a better option. If you can get a friend with you, even better. If there's two of you doing this mission, one guy could take care of the enemies on one side, the other guy take care of the enemies on the other side, and I'm pretty sure it could go even faster, much faster. So if you have friends, even better. But again, this is pretty much an example of how you can do it fairly easily by yourself, without spending 3 hours defeating enemies. I guess if you want to be patient, what you could do is that you could just do your daily missions, and hopefully by the end of the week you could have maybe your 411 enemies. Although I don't think so. I think I tried that with my Wolverine, and even after a week doing all the missions, I still was. I think I didn't even have 200. So if all you do is the missions, my guess is that it will take you like 2 weeks to get 411 enemies, maybe a bit more. But if you come to this spot, then you can do it fairly quickly. So we're almost at 275. And poor Magneto can get his revenge from them evil Nazis who made his life hard when he was a young kid. I know it's a bit of anachronism. Like Magneto should be, I don't know, 12 at that time, but we did travel in the past, so that it's all good. Although, of course, DC made the soldiers savage soldiers as opposed to evil Nazis, which is pretty much not unlike what Marvel did with Hydra when they had the first Captain America movie. Obviously, they didn't want to have Cap fighting Nazis because they wanted the film to play in Germany and do fine. So they went for the Hydra branch, and so they didn't have to call them Nazis, and that did solve their problem. And here DC used the the savage soldiers, which does the same trick. And there's a few really cool base items, some really cool savage banners that you can have for your base. I have a few for my legal. I should probably make a video about that at some point. So again, as you can see, if you pull in too many enemies, then having a supply drop and grandeur ready will probably save your backside. So we crossed the 300 mark, so we have about 100 to go, so we're almost there. So it's going fairly fast, but more importantly, it's going fairly smoothly. Although it wouldn't be a big deal if you end up pulling too many and end up dying. You respawn pretty close, and there's a box to repair if you really need to. So it doesn't really matter. If you want to do it quickly, don't worry too much about pulling too many enemies. The worst that can happen is that you die and you respawn pretty quickly, pretty close, and come back. So if speed is the issue, even if you die 2-3 times, doesn't really matter. You'll still do the mission fairly quickly. So again, as you see, we can sometimes try to pull only 2 or 3 at a time, but then there's this evil guy who spawns out of nowhere who messes up all our plan. So you have to position yourself in a good place to be able to not be overrun too much. So positioning is pretty important in this map. Ideally, I want to position my Magneto so that all the enemies are in front of me. If I start having people attacking me from behind or from the sides, it makes it a lot harder to crowd control them. One of the things that really helps me a lot is the crowd control, because while I'm crowd controlling them, they're not attacking me. So when they're under my control, I'm safe. Of course, the best crowd control is killing them, so if you kill them quickly, you don't really need to crowd control them. Personally, I kind of like the crowd control aspect of the mental powers. Although in my book, the best crowd control is probably Quantum. Quantum usually do a good job at crowd controlling the enemies. There's some missions I remember having a pretty tough time with my Magneto, and my Galactus, who was Quantum, would go into the same mission and wipe the floor with enemies because he would crowd control the heck out of them. So my Galactus could do certain missions at a much lower level than my Magneto could. Although sometimes there were missions that my Magneto could do easier than Galactus. So I guess depending on the power of the mission, there's some sort of trade-off sometimes. So we crossed the 350 mark. Yeah, so only about 60 to go. So ideally I will try to stay in the corner and try to have all the enemies facing me so that I can crowd control most of them. And while they're crowd controlled, they can't attack me. Because if I have enemies on the side, then I'll end up crowd controlling all the enemies in front of me, but all the enemies on the side, or even worse, behind me, will keep on damaging me, and I'll be in trouble if that happens. So positioning can help a bit on certain maps. 375. There we go. It's almost there. So ideally, that's what you want to do. You want to be able to defeat 3 of them, and then you move a bit, and then you defeat the other 3. If you can manage to do that, you shouldn't be overwhelmed, and they shouldn't do too much damage to your character. There's our 3 others. So if you can get them just by a batch of 3s like that, that's the best option. That's perfect. Sadly, sometimes in the heat of the battle, you lose control of what happens. But if you can keep control of what's going on, and if you can manage to always keep only 3 of them, to fight only 3 of them, then you'll be fine. But then again, of course, the power you use is a big help. So if you're using ice powers, odds are you can wipe the floor with all of them at once. If you're using mental powers, as you can see, you can defeat quite a few of them without being too much in trouble. But if you're using electric powers, just fight 3 of them at a time. Don't take any chances. And heck, if you're using electric powers, I'd even go as far as to suggest fight 1 of them at a time. So we're almost done. So we'll try and go defeat our friends on the other area, and we should be done after them. So let's do a final push, and let's go all out. There's no reason to hold back right now. We're essentially pretty much done. So it wasn't too bad, but again, if you want to do this mission by yourself, even if you come in this area, it'll still take about half an hour. At least it did right now. I never really timed it, so I had no real idea of how long it took. But half an hour isn't so bad. With other characters, it would take a lot longer than that. So let's see. So we got 2 boxes. Holy crap, I have a lot of crap. So let's see what's in the box. We'll go for the core element special forces. And we got an equipment box. Ooh, we got a nice ring. I'm not going to use it just yet because I'm not sure if you've noticed. I have some omnipotence rings. Although those rings are combat rating item level 170, the ring I just got could be 173. But I'm not going to use the ring right away. I'm trying to keep my combat rating a little low so that I can still do some Amazon Fury missions and still get some marks of victory. So I'll probably wait a bit before I use that ring. Let's consume that plan. There we go. And let's see what's in the box. Nothing really worth it. At least we got a nice ring, so that'll have to do. So that is pretty much how you can do the 411 mission in about 30 minutes. So that's pretty much it for now, guys. So as always, thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.